It started on one of those cold Charleston mornings, where the sky looked like it hadn't woken up yet. The air was sharp, the cobblestone streets were slick with dew, and the city was quiet but not peaceful. There's a difference. Peace is earned. Silence just hides the rot. Cruising down Calhoun in their patrol car, Sergeant Rick Landry and Officer Blake Meyer, two white boys in blue with too much ego and not enough soul, spotted a lone figure hunched under a busted bus shelter. A homeless black man, curled like a question nobody wanted to answer. Wrinkled coat, scuffed boots, a threadbare hoodie that looked older than both cops combined. He was asleep, or pretending to be. Either way, he was a target. Landry nudged Meyer. "Hey, check out Professor Pavement," he smirked. $10 says he's lecturing pigeons about life lessons and lost dreams." Meyer cackled. "Damn, you smell that? That's the scent of ambition's corpse." He stepped out of the cruiser, all swagger and spite, walked over and, without hesitation, kicked the man's stuff, 2 plastic bags and a weathered backpack, into the gutter. A can of beans rolled into the street, dented. The man didn't move, just opened his eyes slow, dark, still, watching. That kind of stare that makes you uncomfortable, 'cause it doesn't fight back, it just sees you. Landry joined in, crouching down, close enough for his breath to fog the man's cheek. "Bet you wouldn't last 5 minutes clean in a courtroom," he sneered. "World's made of rules, old man. Not pity." He spit on the ground, real close. Not on him, but close enough to say, "I could've." Then both officers laughed, loud, performative, fake, and hopped back in the cruiser like they'd done something brave. Drove off, tires spitting gravel. But the man, still seated, didn't flinch. He sat up, brushed dirt from his coat with a patience that didn't match his setting. He pulled something from the inside pocket of that old jacket, a small, battered leather notebook bound with a rubber band that had seen better decades. And then he stood. No words, no noise, just stood, tall, straight, like the chill didn't touch him. And he started walking. Not wandering, not staggering. Walking, like he had somewhere to be, and someone to remind. Because this wasn't just another day of being ignored, spit on, or talked down to. This wasn't just another random morning in Charleston's shadow. This was the moment something cracked open. They'd seen a homeless man. What they didn't see was the storm he carried. And storms don't knock. They show up, uninvited and unapologetic. The Charleston courthouse was buzzing. Not the kind of buzz you get during a heated divorce trial or a white-collar fraud case, but the kind where everyone in the room knows something bigger is at stake. The kind that makes the air feel heavier, makes cell phones stay in pockets, and even the reporters forget to blink. The case: State v. Landry and Meyer. Charges: excessive force, assault of a minor, falsifying reports, obstruction. Victim: Jamal Rivers, 17, unarmed. His only crime: walking home with a hoodie on and the wrong skin tone for a safe neighborhood. And the defense was arrogant as hell about it. Landry sat at the defense table like he was waiting for a golf score. Not a possible conviction. That trademark smirk glued to his face, like bad cologne. Meyer leaned back, legs slightly spread, arms crossed like he was daring someone to challenge him. Their lawyer, some crusty ex-Fed turned defense specialist, had the jury eating out of his hand with words like reasonable force and imminent threat. It was the kind of trial that made your stomach twist because truth was in the room, but it kept getting shoved behind legal jargon and disappearing witnesses. At the prosecution table, ADA Crystal Danvers looked like she hadn't slept in days, and that wasn't far from the truth. She was sharp, driven, and tough as nails, but this case was eating her alive. Every tape statement had been walked back. The only store camera facing the alley malfunctioned, and her star witness, the boy's neighbor who had seen it all from her second-floor window, gone silent after a surprise visit from a city inspector. Danvers shuffled her notes, lips pressed tight. She hated losing. But worse, She hated losing when the truth was this damn obvious. Judge Whitlow called for a short recess. Gavel down. Jurors stretched. Lawyers scattered. Landry winked at Danvers on the way out. "Careful," he said under his breath. "Might start looking personal." She ignored him. Barely. Then the bailiff approached. Mid-30s, clean-shaven, trustworthy eyes. Slipped her a folded note like it was contraband. She opened it. "You'll want to meet the man in holding room 3. He says he saw everything." She paused, sighed. Probably another dead end, or worse. A false lead meant to stall the case even further. But then, she saw the name scrawled at the bottom. She blinked. Read it again. Her breath caught for half a second. Isaiah D. Holloway. No way. She turned toward the hallway like someone just called her name in a crowded theater. That name hadn't crossed her desk in years. Isaiah Holloway was a myth in legal circles. One of those people who existed more in whispered warnings than public record. A former civil rights attorney. Some said he'd been disbarred. Others claimed he'd disappeared into the streets on purpose. A brilliant legal mind who walked away from the system because he'd seen too much of its guts to keep pretending it worked. But now, he was here, in holding, claiming he saw everything. Crystal grabbed her blazer, heart kicking in her chest, and strode past the milling crowd like a woman on a mission. She didn't know yet what was waiting behind that door. But the moment she stepped inside, holding room 3, everything about this trial, about Charleston, was about to change. And Landry, that smirk of his, it wouldn't survive the hour. Holding room 3 wasn't much. Fluorescents humming overhead, paint peeling in the corners, and a two-way mirror that made everyone inside feel like a suspect. But when Crystal Danvers walked in, she stopped cold, because the man sitting at the table didn't look like any witness she'd ever prepped. His clothes were still rough, layers stitched together with time and necessity, but his face was clean now, beard trimmed, eyes alert. He looked like he'd walked out of 2 different worlds, and never really belonged in either. Sitting in front of her, hunched over a weathered leather notebook that looked like it had its own zip code, was Nathaniel King. She blinked. Not Isaiah Holloway. Not some legendary ghost of the courtroom. Just Nathaniel. No fixed address. No driver's license. No phone. A man who lived in the city's blind spots and apparently saw everything the rest tried to ignore. "Mr. King," she said carefully, taking the seat across from him. "I'm ADA Danvers." He didn't nod. Just flipped a page in his notebook and said, "I know who you are." Right. Of course he did. She glanced at the open pages. Tiny handwriting. Painfully neat. Like it had to matter. Lines of text underlined in red. Badge numbers, partial license plates. Even little drawings. Stick figures with guns drawn. Alleyways sketched from memory. A map of downtown scribbled like a puzzle. It was chaos, but methodical. Like a street-level intelligence dossier, written by a man everyone forgot to count. "You say you saw what happened the night Jamal Rivers was arrested?" she asked. He didn't answer. Instead, he reached into the lining of his coat with practiced care, like he was reaching for something sacred. What he pulled out looked like it belonged in a museum. A cassette tape, wrapped in plastic, worn from age but sealed like it held someone's soul inside. Danvers furrowed her brow. "What is that?" "A piece of truth," Nathaniel said simply. No flair, no drama. He slid the tape across the table. She stared at it. "How'd you even record this?" He tapped his notebook. "Been carrying a tape recorder for years. Got tired of nobody believing what I saw. Figured one day I'd need proof. That night, I was 2 blocks away. Heard shouting, ran toward it, kept the tape rolling the whole time. They didn't see me behind the dumpster. But she picked up the cassette like it might break in her hands. "Do you mind if I—" He nodded once. "Play it." 10 minutes later, the room was silent except for the grainy, crackling audio coming from the old player on the table. She listened to everything. The shouts, the slam of a body against metal. Jamal crying out for help. Landry's voice sneering, "Stop resisting, punk." And then Meyer, clear as day, laughing. "Ain't nobody gonna believe you anyway." Crystal's jaw clenched. She stopped the tape. The silence afterward was deafening. Nathaniel just looked at her. "I can't thank you enough," she said quietly. This could change everything," he shrugged. "Only if it's used." Danvers hesitated, then asked, "Mr. King, would you be willing to testify? Swear to what you saw?" His eyes narrowed, not in fear, but resolve. "Only if they're both in the room to hear me." Crystal stared at him, equal parts respect and awe washing over her. Because this wasn't just a witness. This was a reckoning in secondhand boots. And the moment those officers heard his voice echo across the courtroom, their world was gonna tilt. Hard. There's a specific kind of silence that hits a courtroom when everything changes. Not quiet, silence. Like the air itself holds its breath. That's what it felt like when ADA Crystal Danvers stood up, straightened her blazer and said, "Your Honor, the prosecution calls a surprise witness to the stand, Mr. Nathaniel King." The whole damn room shifted. The doors at the back creaked open, and in walked the man no one expected. Tattered coat, weathered boots, eyes that had seen more of Charleston's underbelly than most of the city's leadership combined. Landry's face. It dropped so fast it looked like gravity owed him a personal grudge. Meyer didn't even pretend to keep his composure. His pale, clammy skin looked like he'd just seen a ghost crawl out of his past and ask for a mic. The jurors leaned in. A couple people in the gallery gasped. A journalist's pen froze mid-word. And Nathaniel? He didn't even blink. He made his way to the stand, slow but steady. No showboating, no dramatics. Just the quiet confidence of a man who knew exactly how much weight his truth carried. He took the oath, sat down, and looked out over the room like someone who'd spent his life being overlooked and was finally done with that era. Danvers approached. No theatrics, just focus. "Mr. King," she began, "can you tell the court what you witnessed on the night of March 27th, in the alley behind Fremont and King Street?" Nathaniel didn't flinch. "I was across the street. I heard yelling. By the time I got to the corner, I saw two officers. Those two right there pinning a boy down. He wasn't fighting, he was screaming. One of them had a knee on his back. The other was swinging a baton." "Do you recall what the boy was saying?" Nathaniel looked straight at Landry. "He kept crying out for his mom, over and over until he couldn't." The courtroom was stone still. Danvers reached into her briefcase and pulled out the tape recorder. "And is this the audio you recorded that night?" "Yes, ma'am." She pressed play. The sound was rough, full of static, but that only made it worse. Made it real. You could hear Jamal's voice, shrill and cracked, pleading, Landry barking orders, Meyer chuckling. And then the sound that made half the room flinch. A baton hitting flesh. Hard. Over and over. Followed by a scream so raw, it shut up even the defense attorney. No one breathed. Not the jury. Not the press. Not the goddamn world outside. When it ended, the sound of the tape stopping might as well have been a gunshot. Danvers let the silence sit like judgment. Then she asked one question, simple, heavy. "Mr. King, why didn't you come forward sooner?" He looked at her, then out at the jury. Then, finally, back at Landry and Meyer, neither of whom could meet his gaze. "Because I've seen what happens when you speak up," he said, voice steady. "I've watched people disappear, get discredited, get stomped by boots that smile for the cameras. But," he paused, just for a breath, "I saw something worse that night. What happens when you don't?" That hit like thunder. People weren't just moved, they were changed, right there in that courtroom. Because Nathaniel King, a man they once ignored on the sidewalk, had just burned the whole damn lie to the ground, with nothing but his memory, a cassette tape, and a spine made of steel. And Landry? His smirk was gone. For good. The minute Nathaniel King stepped down from the stand, Charleston shook. But not everyone clapped. Back in the courtroom, the defense team was already huddled like rats on a sinking ship. Their lead attorney, Lawrence Pike, a silver-haired windbag with the moral backbone of a wet napkin, stood, buttoned his suit jacket like it might protect him from the incoming storm, and launched into a character attack that reeked of desperation. "Your Honor," he began, voice dripping with polished contempt. "The prosecution's star witness is an unhoused man with no fixed address, no verified employment, and," he paused for dramatic effect, "a history of mental health concerns. We believe his testimony should be considered unreliable at best." Gasps from the gallery. Murmurs from the jury box. Danvers didn't flinch. She stood slow, walked to the front like she had nothing but time, and looked the judge straight in the eye. "Permission to call a rebuttal witness?" Judge Whitlow nodded. She turned to the gallery. "The prosecution calls Officer Thomas Grady, retired." The room shifted again. A man in his late 60s shuffled in. Uniform replaced by a navy cardigan, hair thin, eyes sharp. He took the stand quietly. The kind of quiet that says, "I've been waiting for this." Danvers kept it simple. "Officer Grady, do you know the witness, Nathaniel King?" "Yes, ma'am. Knew him for over 20 years." "And how?" Grady smiled faintly. "He used to sit outside the precinct on Summer Street. Cold mornings, hot nights. I used to bring him coffee. Talk sometimes. Never long, but enough." "Would you say he's unreliable?" Grady shook his head. "No, ma'am. I'd say the opposite. That man forgets nothing. I've seen him write down badge numbers, license plates, names, conversations, word for word. Stuff even I forgot 5 minutes later. And the wild part," he leaned into the mic, "he wrote down more truth than most of us ever dared to say out loud." The courtroom fell into that electric hush again. Landry visibly shifted in his seat. Meyer was pale, sweating bullets in a blazer. Danvers nodded. "Thank you, Officer Grady." The media exploded like a grenade had gone off. Homeless witness upends trial. Courtroom bombshell. Civil rights case may be tip of the iceberg. Notebook of truth. Nathaniel King's chronicles sparked judicial review. Social media lit up. Hashtags trended. Protesters showed up. Reporters lined the courthouse steps like birds before a storm. And behind closed doors, the Charleston Police Union was having a full-on meltdown. Statements flew. Damage control ramped up. But it was too late. The court of public opinion had already gone to recess, with receipts. And Nathaniel's notebook? It was no longer just a curiosity. It was evidence. Danvers submitted scans into the court record. Page after page of dates, incidents, names. Judges took notice. Prosecutors got real quiet. Within 48 hours, 3 judges reopened old excessive force cases tied to Landry, Meyer, and 5 other officers Nathaniel had noted down. The DA's office? They did something unthinkable. They asked for a federal monitor. That wasn't just an admission. That was a surrender. Because this case wasn't about just one kid anymore. It was about a pattern. And Nathaniel King, the man with no address, had been chronicling Charleston's rot like a street prophet with a Bic pen and a cassette recorder. He saw what they didn't want seen. And now, everyone was finally looking. It was standing room only in courtroom 4C. The tension wasn't loud. It was tight. The kind that sits in your chest and doesn't let go until someone says the words everyone's been holding their breath for. Landry and Meyer sat stiff at the defense table, suddenly very small men in very large chairs. No smirks now, no jokes. Just the cold realization that their power, their protection, had expired. The jury filed in. The foreperson stood, and just like that, it was done. On the charge of assault with intent to do bodily harm, guilty. On the charge of excessive force, guilty. On the charge of falsifying official reports, guilty. On all counts, Guilty. A ripple tore through the courtroom like thunder underwater. Jamal Rivers' family clutched hands. Danvers let her breath out slow. And Landry? He looked like the earth had just tilted beneath him. But the gavel hadn't even cooled before the aftershock started. Civil suits were filed by Jamal's family and others named in Nathaniel's notebook. Internal Affairs was suddenly real interested in cases they'd lost in dusty archives. A task force was formed. A half-dozen officers were quietly pulled from street duty. And a new acronym echoed through City Hall like a threat: DOJ. But outside the courtroom, that's where the real story picked up. Nathaniel King, Charleston's invisible witness, was offered a job with the city's new Community Oversight Board. A consulting role, modest stipend. A badge that didn't say police, but still held weight. He turned it down. "No thanks," he told Danvers. "I don't want to work for the system. I just want it to work." What he did accept, though, was a small apartment on the west side. Nothing fancy. But it was his. Clean sheets, a place to write, a place to rest. As for the notebook, it was turned over to the Department of Justice in a sealed envelope. Scanned, copied, filed, then quoted by a senior investigator as the most damning and detailed civilian record of systemic misconduct we've ever received. Nathaniel said nothing about that. He just nodded once and walked away. And now he sits on a park bench just a few blocks from the courthouse. Morning light cuts through the trees. Birds chirp like they've never had to testify under oath. He's clean, calm, watching the world like he always has. Quietly, intensely, fully present. Two black kids, middle school age, full of swagger and big dreams, walk past him, laughing, backpacks bouncing. One nudges the other. "Hey, did you hear about that homeless guy who took down 2 cops?" The other nods. "Yeah, they say he was invisible until the whole world had to see him." Nathaniel smiles just barely, eyes still on the courthouse down the street. Because sometimes justice doesn't come on a silver platter. Sometimes it shows up wrapped in a notebook, passed over a courtroom table, written in the margins of a city that never looked close enough. But now, they're looking. And Nathaniel King, he's watching right back.